Welcome to Praise to the King of Kings, heralding the glory of God and the Lordship of Jesus Christ over all of life and all the world. Saltless Salt and Bowl-Covered Lights, May 7th, 2019. I've taken a few shots at the public schools lately. I've argued that the schools are deliberately training children to adopt an unbiblical and therefore anti-biblical worldview. And I've documented the Manitoba Teachers Society's stated intention of promoting homosexuality, transgenderism, and the like to children and teens. My conviction is that Christian parents whom God has tasked with training and discipling their children must not allow their children to be trained to adopt the worldview currently promoted by our public school system. Now, the most common rebuttal to this position is something to this effect. Christian kids need to stay in the school systems to be salt and light in that environment. In other words, Christian kids are there as a witness for Christ, culture influencers who are going to have a positive impact on their teachers, peers, and the system as a whole. Okay, in principle, I can totally get behind that. I completely agree that this is what Christians need to do. I totally agree that we need to engage culture, speak out into the public square, and try to make an impact for the kingdom, hence the purpose of my blog. Where I disagree, however, is in the application. Sending our children to be trained in a God-hating environment, remember, they are literally promoting sin, is not the way that we ought to be engaging culture. Let's examine Jesus' words. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Matthew 5:13-16. Jesus warns that for salt to be worth anything, it must be salty. Also, lights don't help much if they're covered up. So here's the question. Are children salty and shining bright? Are children winsomely engaging their peers and their teachers with the truth of the gospel so as to influence them and have a positive impact on the school as a whole? From what I have observed, I would have to say no. While I acknowledge this is anecdotal, many of the young people in the church seem to have a Christian/secular hybrid worldview. They will enthusiastically agree with certain Christian claims, but have also adopted many patterns of thought and beliefs from the secular worldview air they breathe for 6 hours every day. On the whole, I think it's safe to say that Christian kids are being more influenced by the schools than the schools are being influenced by the Christian kids. Which is to say, that the salt has lost its saltiness and the bowl has snuffed out the light. The strategy of sending 5-year-olds into the public schools to be culture shapers doesn't seem to be working so well. So if this strategy has failed, what would you suggest? Hide kids away? Don't let them have any friends and shelter them from the big scary world? No. Removal from the world is not my recommendation. As I've already said, I wholeheartedly believe that Christians should be engaging with the world, speaking out and making an impact for the kingdom. And that's tough to do if all the Christians have retreated to a monastery somewhere. If we want our children to be able to engage with the culture, we need to train them. Education is discipleship. Bringing up children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord requires teaching, training, correcting, rebuking, setting an example, and so much more. We need to raise our children to have a biblical worldview. We need to train them so they will have the skills and the weapons necessary to survive and gain ground in this battle. Sheltering children is not enough. No amount of isolation from the world will protect your children from the evil within their own hearts. What they need is the gospel. And as parents, we need to ensure that we did everything in our power to lead them to Christ, and that we gave them the tools to engage culture with the gospel. I won't deny that there are children who make it through a full K-12 education and by God's grace are not swept away by the culture. But we have to ask the question, how much better off could they be if we had trained them in a biblical worldview from the very beginning? Imagine if rather than 12 years of secular training in school, followed by damage control at home, they were instead saturated in biblical wisdom, trained consistently to see how all of God's creation relates to Him. Here's the deal. Mathematics, science, languages, and every other subject relates to God. He is the creator of this world and of mathematics, science, etc., and reigns as king over all of it. This means that any approach to these subjects that leaves God out is actually missing the center of everything. So to summarize, our current strategy isn't working, and we shouldn't expect it to. If our children are going to be salt and light, they need to be trained, discipled, and equipped accordingly. Handing over our children to the secularists for training, or to Christians who have been gagged by the secularists, is not a winning strategy for developing world changers. God calls parents to be the primary disciplers of their children, and this necessarily involves education. May we have the courage to do what needs to be done. Soli Deo Gloria.